Video, we are taking a look at unpaid work in macroeconomics. And so, the name of this specific area is Unpaid Work in Macroeconomics Stock Taking Exercise, Gender and Time Use in Global Context. Abstract. This chapter takes stock of what's being done so far in integrating unpaid work as an analytical category into macroeconomics analysis. So, what this chapter starts off saying is that um, macroeconomics of unpaid work. Well, unpaid work is not taken into macroeconomics and policies. Unfortunately, that's what's going on. Unfortunately, unpaid work is not taken into consideration with macroeconomics and policies. Exploration of the impact of unpaid work on macroeconomics outcomes through macroeconomic modeling, policy simulations, and in the context of long run sustainable growth. The review shows that gender distribution of unpaid work acts in two ways: interaction and macroeconomic phenomenon. Production of goods and services through unpaid carrying labor act as an important determinant of macroeconomic indicators, while ignorance of unpaid work in macroeconomic analysis leads to deficiency in policy design and implementation. And so, okay, this is an abstract. That's all I can read, but this says enough for me. It's a collection of papers. There's more here. Link.springer.com. The collection of papers in Baker of 1994 and Kagate and Growth are seminal pieces. The first satellite account study started in the 1970s by the National Institute for Statistics and Economic Studies in France to measure characteristics of sectors such as education, health, tourism, environment, or to change the structure of accounts by expanding the production boundaries, such as measuring household production and other social areas. Satellite accounts were okay. I don't think I need to read into that, but there is some truth that nothing is produced from education, nothing is produced from tourism. These are not things that actually help our economy other than entertainment, when in times when times are good, when things are good for people. But right now, um I mean, we need to deviate back up here to the top and take a look at unpaid work not being taken into account with macroeconomics. Women unemployment driven by inflation. Although the government can take some actions in gender equity, the women unemployment is a challenge that exists in the labor market. Implications of women in economic activities will have a positive impact on economic development at national level, and more financial resources will be injected into the economy. As a result, a growth of inflation of the country is expected for the long term. The paper presents a balance between women's unemployment and inflation rates. If unemployment falls below a certain level, inflation accelerates. So the sufficiency high rate of unemployment, which can avoid this, is called the rate of unemployment that does not accelerate inflation. In the last 4 decades, macroeconomics research has expanded the analysis. So today, we are talking about the existence and the estimation of NIRU, an acronym for non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, which reflects the level of unemployment. You could take every single woman. This is what this is saying. Every single person who doesn't have a job, categorize them as unemployed. I would like to hear that. And you're going to have a huge, huge acceleration of unemployment. Take every single person in the United States of America, put them and categorize them as unemployed, and you are going to see an excessive, huge level of unemployment in this country that you have never seen before. And I would like to see that happen. So everybody in the gig economy who's lost their work, everybody who is military who's lost their work. Because the thing is, you have people who might be paid a little bit of money However, they're not employed. Hello, Maxi Villavicencio. And so you have a whole bunch of people who are not employed related to this. And plus, not only that, the illegals coming into the country has placed a huge toll on the American public. 18 million people, 18 million migrants came into the United States, stole money from the American taxpayers through whatever thing that they did. And they stole money and they were squatting inside of the United States off of the American taxpayers because somebody, Obama, it sounds like, baked that in somehow into the Obama Affordable Health Care program. And so maybe that's something that Donald Trump was aware of, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm trying hard to stay in the center with him and trying to understand what he's talking about, even though I have expressed that I'm not fond of him. But I'm trying to have an understanding that maybe he knows something else that I don't. I'm trying very hard to have that understanding of him. So as a result, a growth of inflation of the country is expected for a long-term period. The paper presents a balance between women unemployment and inflation rates. If unemployment falls below a certain rate, inflation accelerates, so the sufficiency high rate of unemployment can avoid this. Is called the rate of unemployment that does not accelerate inflation. In the last 4 decades, macroeconomic research has expanded the analysis, so today we are talking about the existence of estimation of NIRU, an acronym for non-accelerating inflation rate of employment, which reflects a level of employment corresponding to stable inflation. And so with inflation, then we are just always excluding women all around and home caretakers. This includes men. There's a lot of men who have the means to be able to care for a parent or care for someone while they have an existing job, or they become a home caretaker for an aging elderly parent because they have the means to be able to do that. Now, if their parent, lives a long, long time, they themselves could be, at any given time, be in a situation where maybe they need help, or maybe they decide they need a respite, so they're caring for an aging parent. And then next thing you know, they've been thrown into something. Things are fine at first, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh my gosh, I want to get away just for a little bit. So it's the same thing that women go through when they're caring for children, and so there's a lot of kids who actually don't want to take care of their parents. We're seeing this, unfortunately, as a trend that is accelerating on TikTok, where these young people are just mean. They're absolutely mean to aging people. And I think that's something that someone needs to look out for, related to the future of the internet and TikTok with these young people. And that is a problem too around elderly people, where there's some kids who just have no conscience. Hello, Amelia Jade Beard. Amelia Earhart. That's what I think about, is Amelia Earhart when I think about that. I actually am not going to say what I was going to say, because of the fact that, when I was doing some things, I was naming at one point some of my crochet projects after very famous people, just, in life that I saw on TV. And I started taking and changing the name of things that I was doing to something else, so that, because of the fact that people were so squeamish about copyright. Also, for example, with crochet and things like that, then I would take and I would name it something else, so that it wouldn't come up with other people's things, so they weren't able to actually see that I was using something that had nothing to do with them, and the name wasn't the same as what they were using, for them to accuse me that I was stealing something based off of copyright. So that's why I changed the name of things. And I started using the names of cities and things like that. Oh, Jade. Oh my gosh, Jade. Jade. I like Jade because of the fact it's green. Jade and green. I love green. The rock, Jade. But right now I don't know what it does. It does nothing to help me. Yes, I can Maybe these are things I can use some of the minerals in a video in the near future here. I can, maybe I can. Jade, let me see if, maybe that's something I will do when I think about it. I will, um, try to use jade in one of my AI videos that I make. And so, no, I'm not going down that road. I'm not interested in that garbage. I'm tired of hearing about it. I'm tired of hearing about that um, cleric, Clark. I'm tired of hearing about all that garbage and crap. I'm tired of hearing about that movement. I'm tired of hearing about the poor, pitiful Somalian boy who ended up in a canoe on his way from Zimbabwe, and he ended up on a canoe, and somehow he hijacked a big freighter out in the middle, a big cargo ship out in the middle of the ocean, all by his little old lonesome. He climbed up the side of this 1,000-foot tall ship, and he was on a canoe, and somehow he commandeered the ship all by himself. And now he's wasting away in a prison because he claims that his country is at war, and he's supposed to be Christopher Columbus riding in his canoe over to the United States. I had to make myself laugh, and I did a pretty good job of that, didn't I? I sure did. That would be a funny story. The little boy who commandeered a canoe, and he became a pirate, and he climbed up the side of a giant ship, and he hijacked the ship, and then he spent the rest of his life in prison. So the Zimbabwean Somalian idiot, um, so you guys can see that what kind of of I'm not interested. If you guys don't get it and don't understand it now, maybe you should. You need to start getting it and understanding it now, because that's how I feel about it right now. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the crap. You guys are on your own, and there's people from America telling you the same thing. You're on your own. We're not interested. Someone's cut you loose. Maybe that was the FBI who cut you loose. Maybe it was. Maybe that was part of the investigation they were doing to figure it out. They figured it out. They brought a big portion. I'm going to tell you that right now. It seems like they brought a big portion of the scammers to the United States. And I think that's so they can arrest them, because they're the ones who stole money from the American public. So they bring the criminals to the United States. But because these guys are so dumb, that they'll say, okay, yeah, we'll go on a trip to the United States, because they've been getting away with the crimes for such a long time. They're enticed by the money. Ronaldo or Messi? I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm not interested in football or Ronaldo or Messi. I'm not interested in them at all. Because everything you guys leads to something I'm not interested in. It leads to, Azerbaijan. I'm not interested. That's leads to someone I'm not interested in. I'm just not interested. So the Nauru model, you guys coming to the United States is actually making things harder for women in the United States. You're actually violating the civil rights of American women. Not only that, you guys not being arrested, going to jails and things like that, is violate, because technically you're breaking into the country. So whoever brought you here is a conspirator, and what was it they're committing treason. That's what they said. They're committing treason by doing what they're doing. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. So let's look at this other part here too. Inflation, hardship, gender, and mental health. Highlights. The relationship between inflation, hardship, and mental health is not understood. We find that inflation, hardship is associated with higher levels of distress, and that's an absolute yes. Gender modifies the association between inflation, hardship, and distress when 5 or more inflation hardships are experienced. The experience of 5 or more inflation hardships is more distressing for men than for women. Really? Wow. Inflation hit a 40-year high in the United States in the year 2022. Thank you. Thank you, whoever wrote this. Thank you for writing that, because we're not going to hear about it anyplace else. Inflation hit a 40-year high in the United States in 2022, yet the impact of inflation related hardships on distress is poorly understood, particularly the impact on women whose income is already more limited. There we go, right there. Women's income is more limited. Using data from the U.S. Household Pulse Survey, September to November 2022, we test whether exposure to inflation hardships is associated with greater distress and whether this association is moderated by gender. Let's see here. We draw on it. Now, they haven't even included the distress. They can update this now. This was done in 2022. Inflation, hardship, gender, mental health, and illegal migration. You can update this paper and add all that in there too. And you're going to add more distress on the American public, and you're going to cause more hardship and more pain for people. And so we draw on a list of 18 inflation-related hardships: purchasing less food, working additional jobs, delaying medical treatment to construct an ordinal measure to exposure to inflation hardship, ranging from no inflation hardship to 5 or more inflation hardships. We observe that an increasing number of inflation hardships is associated with higher levels of distress. We find no evidence of gender differences in the magnitude of that association at lower levels of inflation hardship. I agree with that, because I've admitted that myself, that be that whether I'm a man or a woman and you lose a job, you are in a depression. If you get unemployment, you're in a recession because you've lost a little bit of income, and there's the chance that you can get another job. But for men, it seems to be easier because they have a bigger networking thing with each other, and they're more likely to hire a man than they are a woman. But how do you prove that? Well, there's probably more men employed than women. It's most likely that there's more men in the United States employed by women. If we look at the employment statistics, maybe that's something I need to look in one of my videos next, is the employment statistics related to who is employed the most. And I bet we're going to find that men are employed more than women as far as that goes. Women might have self-employment jobs, but we find no evidence of gender differences in the magnitude of that association at lower levels of inflation hardship, for inflation hardships or less. However, our findings suggest that exposure to 5 or more inflation hardships is more strongly associated with distress among men compared to women. The current study provides a new insights into the cumulative burden of inflation hardship on mental health and the role that gender plays in this association. Inflation, well, what about, you can add homelessness in there too. Inflation hit a 40-year high in 2022, Duffy 2022, with the consumer price index increasing by 7.1%. That's inflation right there. Contrary to the Fed saying they're trying to get it to 2%. Other people will say inflation is at 2%, and but the truth is the Fed can't ever, it's a goal he can't ever reach, he can't ever meet. So in November of 2022, compared to a year earlier, Smilik 2022, as a result, inflation has placed a substantial economic burden on people in the United States, including higher grocery, heating, and other essentials, and decreased savings. Cohen 2022, Jones 2022, Pew Research 2022, Reinecke 2022. These burdens can also result in food insecurity, putting off medical treatment. Heck, I don't even have medical. And a host of other stressful circumstances. In this study, we engage with the notion that inflation-related hardships may increase distress, that is, symptoms of depression and anxiety in the population. We test whether there's an association between inflation-related behaviors, decisions, and trade-offs in experiences of distress. We are also interested in whether gender moderates the association between inflation, hardships, and distress. On the one hand, women may experience greater distress in response to inflation hardships than men, in part because women have fewer socioeconomic resources than men. That's true. That's absolutely true. And thus will have less ability to cope with inflation than men. That's absolutely true. On the other hand, the experience of inflation hardship may be more distressing for men and women due to financial pressures often placed on men in U.S. society. We expand on these hypotheses below. It's important to understand the relationship between inflation, gender hardships, and mental health because inflation hardships has the potential to exacerbate pre-existing health inequalities. Background: the relationship between socioeconomic conditions, stress exposure, and health is very well established. S. Cohen, McEwen and Giannaros 2010, Perlin 1999, Schwartz and Meyer 2010, R.J. Turner 2013. The general social determinants of health literature provides frameworks, models, and theories describing the process through which income, education, race, gender, and other markers of social position, and therefore markers of material resources and everyday lived experiences, are associated with health through multiple pathways, including notable through physiological and psychological stress processors. Cohen and Janicki Diverts 2012, Seal 1974. From the sociological literature and stress process framework emphasizes the role of socioeconomic conditions on both the burden of stressful experiences and the resources to cope with experiences of stress. Perlin, 1999, Thotis, 2010, and R.J. Turner, 2013. Finally, biological and physiological research has developed a sense of pathways in the brain and the body that are involved in perceiving and producing stress reactions. McEwen, 2004 to 2007. Individuals who experience chronic exposures to financial hardships and other sources of stress suffer increased wear and tear on their brains and bodies, in part due to repeated activation of the stress response, which ultimately results in increased risks of poor health and mortality. So a large body of work has employed these frameworks to examine the association between socioeconomic conditions, stress exposure, and mental and physical health. Most germane to the current study is the literature that documents not only how mental well-being is affected by one's general socioeconomic circumstances, but how the association manifests in relation to contemporary macroeconomic conditions. Several studies have been examined the mental health impact of the Great Recession. Oh, interesting. The Great Recession. 2012, 2013, 2017, 2020, 2016. They need to call it a Great Depression. 2020, consider the impact of recession-related hardships, cut back on spending, increased credit debt, missed rent payments, moved in with family, job loss on psychological distress, finding a greater exposure to recession-related hardships associated with higher levels of psychological distress. We extend the literature on socioeconomic conditions and health, and particularly the literature on macroeconomic conditions and health, by examining the role of experiences associated with the 2022 rapid rise in inflation. It should be noted that the context in which inflation is occurring comes at the heels of unprecedented circumstances from the COVID-19 pandemic, lockdowns, social distancing measures, economic shutdowns. It is within this context that Americans have been exposed to record high inflation rates. The experience of two macro-level stressors in a relatively short period of time has resulted in long-term exposure to stressful and uncertain circumstances that have challenged Americans' ability to navigate their day-to-day lives. The recent rise in inflation has created a variety of circumstances that may produce stress. For instance, inflation makes everyday necessities and everyday life more expensive. A 2022 Pew survey indicates that 70% of Americans view inflation as the biggest problem facing the country. Doherty and Gomez, 2022. That's a fact. I agree with it too. But what can we do about it? But I'm still going to talk about it. I'm volunteering and doing this for free. I'm not getting paid. Outpacing concerns about affordability of health care, 55%, and violent crime, 54%. Indeed, evidence suggests that food price inflation has increased by 11%, and energy services such as electricity and gas has increased by 15%. U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics 2023 from December 2021 to December 2022. These increases in the price of basic goods and services challenges individuals' ability to meet their everyday needs, and often this requires individuals to make difficult decisions and trade-offs about how to spend and conserve money. Jones 2022, Nationwide 2022, Rosenbaum 2022. What's Rosenbaum? Okay, someone was mentioning, what's Rosenbaum? Open. Inflation, hardship, gender, and mental health. Okay, that must be what we're looking at right here. Patricia Louie, Carrie Wu, Farnaz Shahadi, and I'm not sure what those names are. This can mean facing food insecurity, limiting medical treatments, and other undesirable circumstances. The difficult financial decisions that individuals are forced to make due to inflation, as well as the conditions produced by those decisions, may put individuals at risk for higher levels of distress. Although prior research has not examined the association between inflation, hardships, and distress, a related body of research on general financial strain and/or recession-related hardships document the negative mental health consequences of such experiences. Taken together, we hypothesize that the 2022 rise in inflation and the associated decisions, behaviors, and trade-offs has induced and acted as stressors which may be associated with experience of distress. Not only that, the illegals and the migrants coming into the country. Get them the fuck out of the country. Get the fucking illegals out. I'm tired of them. All of them. I'm tired of seeing them. I can't even go outside. I can't even fucking go outside and enjoy anything outside without them being around. I don't want to hear accents either. I'm tired of them. I am really excruciatingly tired of them. In the current study, we examine a measure of inflation-related hardships. We define inflation hardships as strains associated with increase in the price of goods and services. Inflation is a macroeconomic phenomenon that is a precursor to financial strain. The measure of inflation hardship we employ in the current study captivates the subjective experience of inflation reported by individuals. This is the stuff they won't even talk about on TV at all. I mean, they're just trying to clickbait. They won't even talk about this stuff, about things that people are actually going through, related to an ordinary citizen who can't get by versus an affluent piece of shit politician. I'll leave the word at that. I'll just leave it at that because they're all in the same category, it seems like. Inflation-related hardships represent the individual experience of financial strain resulting from inflation, a macroeconomic precursor. The subjective experience of inflation captures the meaning people ascribe to these larger macroeconomic changes and thus taps into the distinct domain of financial experience. We also hypothesize, and I get tired of the fucking idiots on the internet who actually tell women just to go sleep with some piece of shit man. If someone says that again, I'm going to call the police on them. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I wish I had their information in front of me so I could call the police on them. At least the one thing I know is like when the scammers were calling me on my phone, all I had to do was tell them that I was going to turn them over to the FBI and then they would hang up on me. That was a nice thing about that. When I called them a scammer and I said, "Why are you calling me? I'm going to notify you to the FBI." And they would just hang up on me then. I didn't think they were funny in any way whatsoever. So we also hypothesize that the association between inflation hardships on mental health may vary by gender. The gender system in the USA differentially allocates power and resources based on whether one is categorized as man or woman. I don't know what they're talking about that, because if you're a woman who actually has too much income coming in, the stress is made harder, especially on a woman who has children, because of the fact she's not eligible for social services, contrary to what a lot of these fucking piece of shit men on the internet are saying. And that's all they are, is big pieces of shit, because they come out of what is it? They come out of Wall Street and they're like, oh, women are getting this, they're getting that, and they've got all this. Robert F. Kennedy's a piece of fucking shit. I don't like him anymore. Or JFK, which one is it? The one who wants to control. He wants to control the food and SNAP and all that stuff. And so then he's actually encouraging men, it's almost like to follow around and see what women are doing and what kind of food they're buying and things like that. He's a big piece of shit. It's not his business. He needs to mind his own fucking business. He's a rich ass old man and he wants to govern and dictate. He needs to get his old ass on out of Congress. That's what I think. The Robert F. Kennedy who wants to control food and stuff like that for other people. He's a rich ass fucking Kennedy. He needs to get the hell on out of Congress and he needs to retire. I am tired of him. And it's not his business what people eat. And, I agree that there's bad food that people should be able to have more inexpensive, more healthy food. I agree with that aspect. And, I can agree with some things, not being put on SNAP, such as potato chips and not popcorn. Popcorn is actually good. But it's all inflated prices. No candy and stuff like that. It shouldn't be on there. Because I know when I was a single mom, and the one month, I got food stamps. 1 month, I couldn't buy any potato chips. Fortunately, I had $20 in my pocket. I think I had like a bag of potato chips on there. And the woman at the checkout, she says, well, I'm setting these aside because you're going to have to pay for them out of your pocket. And it's like, I kind of thought I would probably have to do that. And I did. Back then, over 20 years ago, the one time that I got food stamps, I was not able to get potato chips. And why they have allowed it now, I don't know. But they do. They allow junk food to be on there because it's cheaper. So you're supposed to fill up on Cokes and sodas and garbage food and M&Ms and candy. But you know what? The packaging on the food has gotten smaller. The packaging of the potato chips has gotten smaller. So you're getting less for your money right now. I mean, to me, potatoes, bland food, is actually a healthier diet. Bland food. So if you go outside and you get something out of the earth that doesn't have salt on it, it's going to be healthier for you than stuff that's been put in a can. And so, because social relations are organized around gender systems, individuals learn and internalize culturally defined gender norms that in turn construct one's gender identity. Ridgway, 2009. In this paper, we posit that one's gender identity may shape how one responds to inflation, hardship, because the way individuals understand themselves is influenced by cultural expectations attached to different gender groups. Rosenfield, Simon, Thwaites, Wood, and Eagley further cultural defined stereotypes tied gender identities are associated with cognitive behavioral affective styles for men and women. It's also possible that structural features of the gender system related to access to economic resources may play a role in how men versus women respond to inflation hardships, such as we propose two distinct perspectives on how gender may moderate the association between inflation hardships and mental health. On one hand, inflation hardships may be more harmful for women than men because women have less income and less wealth, and thus it may be harder for women to cope with the rising prices associated with inflation. Other factors, such as the concentration of poverty among women, Congressional Research Service 2021. Let's see what this is. This looks interesting. Congressional research. Oh, it's just mentioned in the same thing that I'm looking at. As well as greater unpaid care burden placed on women, potentially make women vulnerable to inflation hardships. Indeed, some research finds that financial stress are more harmful to the mental health of women relative to men. Further evidence from other countries, UK, Spain, and Finland, suggests that economic crises have stronger negative effects on the mental health of women than men. In addition, women may be more aware of inflation than men because women are more likely to do the household grocery shopping, and as a result may be exposed to increasing prices more frequently than men. Now, this is something I actually remember. I'm not going to hold back. I can get much worse, but I'm not going to hold back. Thank you, Wild One. Love the way you don't hold back on how you voice your opinion. There's times when four-letter words are needed to get a point across. It catches the attention needed when speaking. I agree. I agree. I just don't like to throw it out there all the time. But okay, I have to share a memory from when my kids were little. My first husband and I would go to a warehouse store to go shopping, and we had to actually use a calculator in the store. This was me every fucking week. I would be using a calculator in the store specifically because I might have had $100. So I got to the point back then. $100. There might have been $15. I would estimate for taxes at the store, or maybe at one time we didn't pay taxes because I was thinking at one time, I know the commissary said something about we don't pay taxes on a federal installation, but yet we were charged another type of surcharge in the, I think it was a store fee, and they only charged us like $2 or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were saying we never paid taxes in the grocery store on a military base. Um, or we weren't supposed to. But when you shopped in the civilian world, we we paid taxes on our food. They put that thing in there that we paid tax. So look at all the different. If we add up all the different taxes, we pay a lot of taxes on a lot of different things. I mean, and it's more than double taxation is what we are paying. It's inflation taxation is what we are paying. Let's see what he says. Farhan Mustafa Ansari, Assalamu alaikum, sister means God bless you. Why, thank you. Yeah, I just like to tell it how I've always been the kind of person to tell it how it is. I don't know what I have to do to get someone's attention because this is a big problem for people in our society, and we're being punished. It's a big revenge fuck, is what it is. That's what I see. Now, I'm not sure who's doing it right now. It seems like the greedy rich people are doing it because if they can't get their money some one way or another, we're being fucking held hostage is what's going on. We're being held hostage. We're being held hostage to inflation because of the fact that they have bought into bad debt. This is my opinion. Someone has bought into a bunch of bad debt. They don't have the money to pay it back. I think it has something to do with Wall Street and Hollywood. So they were hedging a bet, and that's what hedging is. If you have a hedge fund, it's the same thing as a brokerage. Some hedge funds may be backed by the government, other hedge funds may not be. That's how you end up with Bernie Madoff dying in prison because he was a creep and he actually was supposed to be making money for people. But see, what would happen with Bernie Madoff is that he was paying other people from the money of the other investors that was coming in because he wasn't making anybody any money. So he was just losing money. He was just had money coming in. He was paying himself. He was stealing money. That's a Ponzi scam, So, inflation. I mean, so it in a roundabout sort of way that does turn. Now the government, they can print more money, they can create more money. But the problem is the private sector, they always just raise prices just for no reason. They don't have to, but they do. Somehow I love to listen to you. You are a knowledge of encyclopedia. Why, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate at least there's one person who will listen to me. Um, I mean, contrary, oh my gosh, my piece of shit second husband didn't want to listen to me. Now, my first husband, he would listen to me. He actually, we had some, I don't even know what we talked about. We would talk about things from time to time. He was a decent person just to talk to, even though he did things in our marriage that was a deal breaker, which is why it ended. But as far as talking to him, he was a decent person to talk to from time to time. And sometimes he would try to do things, but I think he didn't get that until it was too late. He didn't understand it until it was too late. And, So, I mean, that's his own fault for not listening to me. He always said things like, oh, I'm not going to be henpecked like your mom does to your dad. I'm not going to be henpecked. So basically, he was saying he didn't want to be told what to do. He also said, it's my money. I can do with it what I want to. So he was the one going to work. He didn't really want to, he didn't really want to, even though he had to give me money, he just wanted to spend every amount of money that he made. And so that's something I think the United States military needs to take into consideration, because a lot of military spouses, because the soldier controls the money, the spouses are probably going to be like I was in certain situations where we lived paycheck to paycheck, sometimes have no money because he spent all the money. And then especially if you have a chain of command that doesn't want to listen to a wife, or doesn't want to get involved, or just they really don't want to deal with the wives. That's what I found when I was a military spouse. The men just didn't want to get involved. I think maybe women in the military might. If you have a woman who's a good in the chain of command, and when I just say good, I just mean she's going to take on a different perspective because she is a woman. She might be a mom. She might not be single. She might be a single mom. And there are two different variables there. She might be a single mom, and I said, or she might not be single. She might be married, or she might be single. So, there's different types of variables related to what kind of female that she is. Because a lot of times women do end up having a family. And, a lot of times that's why women will join the military, is because they have a family. A lot of people do. That's why they join the military altogether, is because they have a family. That's why people go get a job, because they have a family. But we're talking about inflation right here. Inflation and how it's harmful to the mental well-being of the American public. And this is a current paper on this. So on the other hand, a second perspective uh, posits that inflation hardships would be more harmful to men than women. So it's taking on both sides, saying that one could be hard on women more, or more harmful to men. But I think in the end, it's probably going to come up that it's harmful to both. Stereotypically, conceptions of masculinity require men to be economically stable. That's true. I agree with that. That men typically in the past, the burden was placed on them. But there's also a burden on the women too, and breadwinners in the context of the family. In addition, economic success is closely tied to masculine identities, while feminine identities are often less associated with financial success. That's true. The female incomes are often considered secondary in the context of romantic relationships. That's true. And the family evidence from the nationally representative survey conducted in 2017 found that while 71% of Americans believe in a good husband partner must be able to support a family financially, only 32% believe this is to be true for a good wife partner. Parker and Stepler 2017. As such, the stress inflation may be particularly salient for men because of an inability to purchase certain goods and services may undermine their feeling of self-worth. It should be noted, I think self-worth should be, if a person was going to put something in self-worth, the only self-worth in purchasing should be food, water, shelter, and clothing. And maybe transportation, and yes, transportation, I have to say that, because self-worth does become a problem for people, in the sense of if they don't have transportation, they don't have a car, then it does tear at a person's self-esteem, and even in being able to maintain a car because of inflation. It should be noted that the experience of inflation hardship may be harmful for both marriage and single. Thank you. Thank you. This sounds like I wrote this. It should be noted that the experience of inflation hardship may be harmful for both married and single men, due to the fact that men, regardless of marital status, are often evaluated based on their financial resources. That's true. Because I found that with my own son, who's single, and he felt like crap. He actually ended up with help way before I've ended up with help. because he has ties to the Veterans Administration. So he ended up with help long before I have. And for me, it just lingers. So my son was able to, well, he had a relative who actually felt sorry for him, but he exploited him at the same time. So what happened? I gotta explain this. So my son moved in with an uncle, and his uncle was charging him rent. More the price that he was charging him was more than what a house payment would be. People need to take that into consideration. Society needs to take that into consideration. With I think boarding houses, under the circumstances like with how my son was living, I think that should be banned. I don't think people should be able to, um, so basically my son was paying someone else's rent. Hello, nobody. So I think that practice should be banned because my son ended up moving with an uncle. And so he was paying $450 a month rent. And then during COVID, his uncle raised the rent up to $650 a month. So that's more than a house payment. I mean, now, yeah, granted, a lot of house payments right now can be very, very expensive, or you can double up or triple up payments. I was thinking that the house payment that when I was married and when the house was refinanced, when my YouTube channel was doing good, I think the actual house payment was between $400 to $600 a month, and then he started doubling the payment. But then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. He's asking for $4,000 right now, and he only needs $1,200 for the house payment. Where did the extra $3,000 go? I didn't even think but he's like, oh, well, you bought this, and this, and I need $4,000. So, when I think about that too, it's kind of like when I think about the celebrities who have been screwed over. There is some comparison to these analogies related to YouTube. When you have money coming in and you have a spouse who's screwing you over. So a lot of celebrities who might be single, well, they've said the same thing. There are some huge comparisons. I was never a celebrity. There's huge comparisons though, because you have a person, and if you're married, you better know that you might be able to trust or not trust that person. And so he started showing his hand. The closer he got to retirement, the closer the house got to being paid off. He started showing his true colors. This was shortly before the insurrection. This was around at the time of Black Lives Matters and Antifa. And so he had no reason to actually act bad the way that he did at any given time then. So his true colors, so all of that enabled him and empowered him to show his true colors against me, which was he hates white people. That's what came out of my marriage. So I couldn't predict that. I mean, we were legally married, and he told the judge he didn't want to be married. And I'm like, well, why, if that's true, why did you get, I mean, I hate to say it, but at that time, it didn't really hurt, but it was like he was saying stuff to hurt me because I was glad to be away from him because I knew the violence was getting worse from him. I would have ended up dead. That's what would have happened. I would have ended up dead if I would have stayed in the marriage. And he hated the police. Now, I wasn't calling the police on him. The police came on their own to the house. I was fine with that. For whatever reason they were coming, they came to the house for things that I was posting on the internet, and they just wanted to ask me questions. That was the only, I thought, that's harmless. Why is he getting so uncomfortable with the police coming to the house? Now, if you have a partner who is that uncomfortable with the police coming to the house, and so much to the point that they will hit you, you have a violent man, and he's going to do the same thing again in the future. He is going to be violent again in the future. He needs to be sent to prison for a very long time for the rest of his life. That's what I think. I don't know why they let him out of prison or jail when he was in jail. Someone bailed him out. I don't know why the judge awarded him the house. I don't know why things weren't connected so that I was made homeless. But that's what happened. There's no help for me. So, so this article is almost like it coincides with um, things I've been talking about. Things that kind of go unnoticed. So hopefully we don't have, we can read the covers of these books. That's what they're for. And we can put in our opinion. That's what mixing the content up is. So we're not violating a copyright. So I'm talking about my opinion in here, my personal life experiences in here with this, because these are things that happen to me, you know, and they're always going to be a part of me, contrary to what people who just want you to forget about things. When you have people who say, oh, just forget about it, just, there's another person, I'm really surprised, who is slowly coming around, who's a family member, slowly coming around, and, not telling me to not talk about things right now. I'm really surprised that there's kind of been a little come around with someone very unexpected who is a family member of mine. I don't talk to them a whole lot, but I have a little bit more. I have to make the initiative to call myself. But they are a little bit more willing to talk right now, which is really surprising, and talk a little bit about politics and be a little bit less controlling about the conversation and where it goes. I'm really surprised about that. I get that because of the fact they said that they always wanted their family to get along and they didn't want to talk about politics and things like that. But then at the same time, they're so fixated on don't talk about politics, then then it's like, okay, you're telling everybody you don't want your family to be talking about politics, you just want to care about your family. I get that. I get that people, that people just want to get along. You say it over and over so much that it becomes oppressive, so much to the point of, well, what do you talk about? So when you've not been around, I've asked my son this question too. I've said, well, what are we supposed to talk about? So then I end up with nobody calling me. And I asked that to my mom and dad too. 3 years ago when I first became homeless. I said, well, what are we supposed to talk about? I said, I haven't been around you guys most of my adult life. I don't know what we're supposed to talk about. And so I started writing them emails and getting stuff off of my chest. And it sounded like my mom was reading them. Maybe my dad wasn't. I didn't realize my mom might have had Alzheimer's. And, so she was saying things that really didn't make sense to me. And, but she seemed and sounded fine to me. I mean, she could talk on the phone. She remembered things perfectly fine. Then eventually my dad got on the phone and he said, well, your mom said she's not remembering things as good as what she used to remember things. So, and then within the year she had passed away. So that makes sense to me there, but if he doesn't tell me, how am I supposed to know? I'm not there. I wished I could have been there. I actually wished I could have been there when my mom died. So I could have been there to hold her hand or something, That's what I wish, but I wasn't. And so it's been a year since she died. A year since my mom died. I wasn't able to give her a hug one more time. And that's kind of the thing when you think about your own kids. You think about the last time you were able to hold their hand when they were a kid or give them a hug. I wasn't able to have that relationship. I just hate seeing these people on the internet, and I don't know where they come from. They're like, oh, well, my family is this and my family is this. We're all around each other all the time and we get along great. We might get in fights, but I get so sick of them, and it's some of it's kind of like that Disney bullshit too. I think a lot of it's out of Disney when they put those what they call traditional housewives on the internet. I think it's out of Disney and they're paid actors because they're so nauseating. And it's like, you guys are not depicting real America when it comes down to people who have not been around their family and the breakdown of the families. And when you don't depict that white people have had a breakdown in our families. And I've been researching this in the Google, what is it, in the Scholar, in the books, and it's a real thing. They have dates and statistics about all of it, but legacy media, they won't ever talk about that. They're doing the clickbait, they're manipulating the algorithm, and and then they get people outside of the country. I saw that today. The ones outside of the country manipulating the algorithm. I can sit there and I can watch it. They give them the cards, or they'll write something in the comment section. If I get more of those from foreign countries, I'm just not going to write. Or this is what I did. This is what I did. I will write something in another language that they don't understand. That means I am taking some letters from that are English letters, and I'm rearranging them in a word that's not really a word in the English language. I had some guy it was so funny today. I had some guy from a foreign country. He's like, write English, write English. He said he was from Somalia. And I'm thinking, I am writing English. I just rearranged the American alphabet into some words that are not really words. So he thought I was speaking a foreign language. So for other countries around the world actually use American alphabet letters, very similar to the United States. And so I just rearrange the words into something, and I just make up words, and then they think I'm speaking. They're, write English so I understand it. And I'm like, no, I'm thinking, no, I'm just making up my own letters. You want me to? And so this one guy who was saying he speaks French and English. Now, it didn't sound like he spoke. He was able to repeat questions, and he was just repeating the same questions over and over again. He said something about a conversation. He wanted to have a conversation, but he didn't actually seem to be very fluent in English. It sounded like there was some questions that he could ask and repeat, but he wasn't like, I asked him to tell me about slavery in Somalia, and he wouldn't do it. I said, can you tell me about the history of Somalia and on the continent of Africa and enslaving your own people? He didn't seem to understand that. Then I did write something in French, and he didn't respond to it. So I don't even think he knew French. I really don't. I don't think he even knew French. And so in the wake of the Great Recession, a historic time of reductions in employment, earnings, assets, and incomes, 2012. So the Great Recession of 2012, that was after Obama 2008. Research showed that men reported poorer mental health during this period relative to pre-recession. Now think about the insurrection, how much worse it's gotten. Like me, Roman English is Urdu sentence. I don't know what Urdu sentence is. I have absolutely no idea. While there is no significant changes in the mental health of women over this period, because nobody's doing a study on it. Pre-recession 2008. While there's no significant changes in the mental health of women over this period, that's because nobody's doing a study on it. They're just doing studies on men. Given the breadth of evidence, it is possible that inflation hardships will be more deleterious to mental health for both men and women. The present study has two aims. First, we examine the relationship between inflation hardships and mental health. Specified as no inflation hardship, one inflation hardship, two inflation hardship. I can probably fill out a dozen for my own self. You factor in domestic violence, being made homeless, losing your income, emotional distress, being cut off of all money, so you have no money to buy food. And so for the past 3 years, being homeless, contacting churches and nonprofit groups asking for help, and they reject you at every step of the way, contacting the government, and they're no help. So we test whether gender modifies the association between inflation hardships and distress. Data was obtained from the Household Plus survey. I don't know, never heard of that. An online probability based survey of adults aged 18 or older conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau to rapidly measure the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on American households across the country from social and economic perspective. We included data from phase 3.6 of HPS fielded from September 14th to 2022 to September 28th, 2022, October 5th, 2022 to October 17th, 2022, and November 2nd, 2022 to November 14th, 2022. The data included a total sample of 154,430. The listwise deletion method was adopted to handle the missing data, resulting in a sample size of 119,531. A sensitivity analysis was conducted using multiple imputation. A result based on the full sample and imputed values were consistent with the results of the sample that used listwise deletion to remove missing data. In the current study, estimates are weighed to adjust the non-response to match Census Bureau estimates of the population by age, sex, race, ethnicity, and educational attainment. To understand how, yeah, I don't think I need to read any more of that. Yeah, because I think that I've read enough in here. What is this? What is this? Controls we adjust for socioeconomic variables that could confound the relationship between inflation, hardship, and distress, including education, income, and employment. In 2020, what was your total household income before taxes? Responses included 25,000 reference, 25,000 to 34,000. 35,000 to 49,000, 50,000 to 74,000, 75,000 to 99,000, 100,000 to 149,000, 150,000 to 199,000, and then 200,000 and above. My gosh, I would have loved to have made 200,000 and above. Employment status was measuring by asking respondents in the last 7 days, did you do any work for either pay or profit? Yes or no? Well, what's the difference between pay and profit? Because every person who does something for pay is making some sort of a profit, aren't they? So if you do something for pay, you're making a profit. So when you receive Social Security or a welfare or something like that, you're making a profit. Now it's money in and money out. That's what the government does, money in, money out, without an expectation of making a profit or going above, highly above. So if the response, that's why the government has to adjust for cost of living, because otherwise, if we didn't adjust for cost of living, people might be only making $50 a month for Social Security from back 50, 60, 70 years ago. Is that what you guys want? I mean, that seems so sick and twisted. And even for people who are on welfare too. I'm a proponent for people being taken care of. That's just, I always have been. But we have to look at a lot of things, though, a lot of variables. Let's see. Employed reference, unemployed, caretaker, retired, and other. In addition, we control for race, self-reported as non-Hispanic, white reference, non-Hispanic, black, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, Asian, and non-Hispanic other due to substantial differences in socioeconomic resources between racial groups that may impact experience of inflation hardships. Maybe that's rooting out the people who are in the United States who are illegal. Someone's been paying for them to be in the country illegally. We also control for the number of children in the household under the age of 18 because of a greater number of children may increase inflation, hardship, and distress. That's a fact. Absolutely. That also deteriorates relationships and marriages. Money always does. Models include age, measures in years, and age squared because the relationship between inflation and hardship may differ by age. We control for marital status because the experience of inflation hardship may differ depending on whether one is married, reference single, or never married or widowed, separated or divorced. Models also control for region, north reference, Midwest, west, or south, and a week of survey to account for changes in mental health during data collection. Analysis. Data analysis proceeds. I know I said I was going to stop doing this, but I found this interesting related to the data collection for the survey of what people were making. It doesn't actually say how much people were making, but the truth of the matter is, okay, here's some percentages in here too. Variable, female, male, dependent variables, mean, SD, focal measures, inflation hardship, no inflation hardships, one inflation hardship, two inflation hardship. It seems like the one inflation and two inflation hardships are the ones that are the highest amount. Five or more inflation hardships, they're there. They are there. Age, 50, 16, 49, and 16. I'm not sure what are those percentages. I'm not sure what their chart means. That's the problem now, is I have no idea what their chart means. So that's what I'm seeing right here is the chart. Utilize benefits from charity. I don't know where people are getting the charity from. I mean, it's just we hear about it all the time, but where are we getting it from? Move to less expensive housing. Well, how does a person move to less expensive housing when apartments are the same price, are more expensive than buying a house? But yet, if you wanted to buy a house, you can't buy a house because you don't make enough money. You're on Social Security. You're on a fixed income. So you can't actually buy a house. And you're a single person. You can't buy a house. What you're left with is a dump, a dilapidated dump.